The events of the series take place in Japan. Our main character is named Arisu. He is a typical gamer who spends hours in front of his computer playing games and is unemployed. Arisu lives with his younger brother and his father, while their mother left the family. Unlike Arisu, his younger brother does not spend his days behind a computer. Instead, he works. He even offered to help Arisu find a job, but Arisu refused to attend an interview. The younger brother insists that aside from games, there is a real life, and Arisu will have no other life. He declares that he will no longer give him money and calls him a parasite. Their father shares these sentiments, urging the younger brother to stop financially supporting Arisu. Fed up with the constant chatter at home about how much of a freeloader he is, Arisu decides to leave and writes to his friend Karubi. At that moment, Karubi is at a bar. Not working, he is flirting with his boss's girlfriend. Unexpectedly, his boss appears in the bar. A conflict ensues between Karube and his boss, during which Karube wins but loses his job. Not receiving a reply from Karube, Arisu writes to his second friend, Chota. However, Chota also overlooks the message as he reluctantly hands a bundle of money to his mother, who is unemployed. Having received no responses from his friends, Arisu begins playing with a Rubik's Cube on his phone, revealing that he is not only a computer game addict, but also a genius who quickly solves complex puzzles. Shortly thereafter, in a group chat, Karube tells his friends that he has been fired, but judging by his mood, he does not seem overly concerned. The friends arrange to meet at Shibuya Station to drink sake at a local cafe. Upon meeting, the trio realizes that it is still early in the day and that the bars where one can drink sake are closed. Observing the noisy crowd, Chota jokes that it would be cool if a zombie apocalypse began. Arisu replies that in such a case, Karube would be the only survivor, as he is an experienced fighter. Karube, however, insists that Arisu will survive because he is a genius who will outsmart everyone. Karube asks Arisu to start leading a proper life and to find a job, but Arisu refuses. Then Karube hoists Arisu onto his shoulders and heads straight into the center of a pedestrian crossing. Chota begins filming them on his phone. Their wild stunt attracts many stares, and then the sound of a car horn brings them back to reality. They have inadvertently ended up in the middle of the road. Their actions cause a traffic accident. Seeing the police, the three run away and hide in a metro restroom. Inside, they continue laughing, but suddenly the lights go out and their phones stop working as well. After a while, they hear someone desperately knocking on the door of a stall. Not daring to make a sound, they wait until everything falls silent. Once quiet, they exit the restroom and are completely stunned. At the metro station, which just a few minutes ago was bustling, not a single soul remains, as if the city had been vacuumed. The shopping center is also empty. Karube returns to the bar from which he was fired. Chota hurries to the IT company where he works, only to discover that the office is completely empty. Looking out the window, he realizes that everyone in the city has vanished. Arisu roams the streets in search of anyone, but finds no one. As night falls, they sit on the sidewalk and wonder whether this could be a nuclear war drill. Arisu and Chota remark that if everyone has disappeared, it might not be so bad. There would be no need to work, and one could eat and drink as much as desired. Karube, however, does not share their joy, for his beloved Seiya, the very same girl from the bar who is the boss's girlfriend, has vanished, and he was planning to propose to her. Suddenly, a liquid crystal display on the building behind them lights up with the words, "Welcome, the game will begin soon." The building then instructs the players to follow the arrows. The group notices a red glow above an old building. All three run toward the glow and, following the arrows, arrive at an elevator near which several phones lie. When they pick up the phones, facial recognition automatically activates, indicating that registration for the game will end in 2 minutes. At that moment, a woman named Shibuki appears at the end of the corridor. She takes Chota's badge from the pocket of his shirt and tosses it aside. The badge is instantly incinerated by a laser. Shibuki explains that they can no longer leave. Once the players have entered the game arena, there is no way back. Arisu goes to inspect a laser that suddenly shoots through the ceiling, and he realizes that escape is truly impossible. At that moment, a high school girl runs up to them. The three men try to stop her from crossing the laser's boundary, but it is too late. She crosses the line and becomes the 5th participant in the upcoming game. Soon, a voice over the phone announces that registration is complete and that the game, titled Life or Dream, is beginning. The level's difficulty is 3 of clubs, though no one understands what that means. Suddenly, the elevator doors open. Shibuki enters first, followed by the other players. When the elevator doors open again, a message appears on their phones. They have 2 minutes to complete the room. The task is to choose the correct door within that time and the countdown begins. Before them stand two doors, one bearing the image of an anime girl symbolizing life, and the other featuring a skull symbolizing dream. Chota thinks it is some kind of prank and begins filming on his phone, while Arisu asks what will happen if they choose the wrong door. Shibuki does not answer, insisting that the door must be the correct one. Suddenly, thick smoke begins to rise from the floor, and the phone warns that only 30 seconds remain. Eager to finish the game quickly, the high school girl opens the life door. As soon as she enters, she is struck by a laser beam. Shibuki opens the dream door and enters, followed by Karubi and Arisu. Seeing that Chota is still in a state of shock, Arisu quickly pulls him along. Barely do they close the door when flames burst forth from the floor. In the new room, the phone announces that the allotted time for completion is 1 minute and 50 seconds. Before them are two doors once again, with the same choice, life or dream. Shibuki explains that in this game, regardless of the door, a victim must be chosen within the allotted time. No one wants to sacrifice themselves, but time is running out. While everyone argues and refuses to open a door, thick smoke begins to rise from the floor once more. Arisu decides to take a risk and open the dream door, but he changes his mind at the last moment. Karub takes the initiative and opts to open the life door, but only on the condition that next time, Shibuki will do it. The door turns out to be safe, proving the girl's assumption to be incorrect. The time for the new room is 1 minute and 40 seconds. For each room completed, 10 seconds are subtracted. This time, Karub shouts at Shibuki to open the door, but she is afraid. Then Karubi urges Arisu to come up with a solution, insisting that he is a genius who easily solves puzzles that stump his friends. Arisu protests, saying that this is not a game, but Karubi continues to pressure him. At the very beginning of the series, we were shown that Arisu, in addition to his computer disks, owns many books on fractal geometry. That is, although he is a nerd, he is quite the intellectual. Despite Karub's pleas for him to pull himself together, panic overwhelms Arisu. He shouts that nothing will work out. When only 10 seconds remain, Arisu solves the puzzle. He confidently opens the dream door and confirms that it is safe. They rush into the fourth room, where the countdown begins again. This time, they are given 1 minute and 30 seconds to choose the next door. Arisu explains to his friends that a car was parked between the game buildings. Its length is 4 meters and 94 centimeters. The building's length is roughly equal to the length of 4 such cars, that is, about 20 meters. Arisu quickly sketches a map and determines that the next correct door is the dream door. When only 10 seconds remain, everyone dashes toward the dream door and is saved once again. The group feels a spark of hope. They have managed to pass through several doors thanks to Arisu. However, soon after, he freezes upon seeing a wall with no doors before him. Arisu remarks that the last door should have been in front of them, leading outside, but the exits are only on the sides. The main character realizes that he has overlooked something. The room begins to fill with gas, and they have 30 seconds left. Then Arisu remembers that Chota was recording video. Quickly checking the recording, he notices that in the room opened by the high school girl, there was no door. This means that the room is not square, but divided into 2 parts. Now they need to reach that very second half of the room. When only 5 seconds remain in the game, Arisu and his friends dash toward the life door. Chota, who runs last, suffers a burn on his leg from the flames. As soon as they enter the new room, a reverse 10-second countdown begins. Arisu opens the final dream door and successfully leads the others outside. The room immediately bursts into flames. Arisu and his friends run through a narrow corridor and then descend a staircase from the building. Their phones receive a congratulatory message for completing the level. Shibuki notices a playing card suit and picks it up from the table. A minute later, a new message appears on their phones. They have received a 3-day visa that allows them to refrain from participating in the games during that time. At that moment, a staggering man approaches them, announcing that his visa has expired. He warns the group that no matter how many levels they complete, the game will never end. Before he can finish speaking, a laser beam strikes him. Shibuki immediately realizes that all players whose visas expire will be eliminated by a laser. To survive, they must continue participating in the games. Suddenly, several laser beams fall from the sky onto the city, indicating that many players have been eliminated from the game. On the roof of one of the buildings stands a short-haired girl holding a map, watching the scene. Her name is Usagi. A new day dawns. Arisu finds an unlocked car, but no matter how hard he tries, he cannot start it. Chota discovers that all electronic devices containing microchips, such as cameras and digital watches, are not working. He speculates that this is due to an electromagnetic pulse. He once read on the internet that such a weapon is capable of instantly destroying all electronics in the city if launched into the stratosphere. Arisu wonders, if that is so, then why do the mobile phones they use in the game continue to work? As soon as he voices his doubts, his phone unexpectedly shuts off. While Arisu and Chota search for any functioning electronics, Karubi, together with Shibuki, heads to a shopping center. Karubi picks up a dagger for self-defense at a supermarket, and Shibuki finds a battery-operated heater. This leads them to conclude that battery-powered devices still work. They prepare a hot meal and eat. Shibuki explains that she entered the game 3 days ago and had already participated in one of them in the subway, where gas was used. Only she survived that game. Arisu finds this strange, as people disappeared only yesterday. The only thing he is certain of is that behind the scenes there is a game master who controls the game and watches over them. Chota suggests that microchips with location tracking systems may have been implanted in their bodies. Shibuki mentions that one day a Scandinavian technology company commissioned her employers to create a virtual reality identical to the real world. Chota insists that he would never confuse the virtual world with reality, as his burns are entirely real. In the evening, Karub proposes that the next day he and Arisu should enter the game alone, without the others, in order to learn how to adapt and win. Karube says that Chota is currently a burden because of his burn, and if they do not learn to win on their own, they certainly will not be able to protect their friend. Moreover, by participating in the games, they might be able to find a doctor to treat Chota's burns. Arisu agrees with this proposal. The next day, when night falls, a 7-story residential building suddenly lights up. Usagi, the very same girl we saw on the roof of one of Tokyo's buildings, enters the game. A newcomer wearing a cap approaches the participants and asks where all the residents of the city have gone. While he is speaking, a burly man named Aguni appears. Soon, Arisu and Karube join the group. At that moment, a message appears on the participants' phones stating that registration is complete. There are 13 participants and the game is about to begin. The difficulty level is 5 of spades. A real estate broker approaches Arisu and explains that the suit of the card determines the genre of the game. Spades represent games of strength and endurance, clubs are team games, diamonds are games of ingenuity, and the most unpleasant suit, hearts, is associated with betrayal. The number on the card indicates the level of difficulty. The higher the number, the more difficult the game. Today's game is an ordinary game of strength. The game rules, titled Tag, are sent to the participants' phones. Their task is to find a safe zone within the residential complex in 20 minutes. If they fail, they will lose and the building will be destroyed. 2 minutes remain until the game begins. The broker attempts to befriend Arisu and Karube. After everyone disperses to their respective floors, the game begins. The phone informs all the players that the chaser has arrived. Arisu, Karubi, and the broker are on the 5th floor and hear the sound of gunfire. The 3 cautiously move forward and see that one of the players has been eliminated from the game. When Arisu and Karubi peek around the corner, they notice a man in a horse mask. The trio flees downward. The broker heads to the 2nd floor, while Arisu pulls Karube into a hiding place on the 3rd floor. The man in the horse mask descends to the 1st floor and eliminates the broker from the game. One of the participants, upon seeing the man in the horse mask, becomes frightened and decides to exit the game. But as soon as he touches the laser at the entrance, he is instantly eliminated. 5 minutes later, the man in the horse mask eliminates 2 more girls from the game. Arisu and Karube watch him closely. Arisu realizes that the opponent's field of vision is greatly limited by his mask, which may be their chance to win. Arisu rushes out of hiding and shouts that the man in the horse mask is on the 2nd floor. He urges the other participants to band together to win the game and search for the correct room as a team. Hearing this, Usagi transmits the location of the man in the horse mask to all the other players. However, the man in the horse mask locates Usagi by sound, and she is forced to run away. Usagi climbs to the 5th floor using a pipe. Thanks to her climbing skills, she easily moves between floors. 8 minutes remain until the end of the game. When the newcomer is about to open a door, gunshots are fired. The newcomer is so frightened that he curls up in a corner and does not dare to move. Arisu pulls him to safety. 6 minutes remain until the end of the game. Karub tells Arisu and the newcomer to move on, while he wishes to stay behind to delay the man in the horse mask. At that moment, Aguni appears. After analyzing the chaser, he notes that the man is clumsily handling his weapon and asserts that he can be eliminated from the game. Then the bandaged man brings a fire extinguisher. Arisu notices that Aguni and the bandaged man wear identical bracelets. Aguni hands the fire extinguisher to Karube so that he and Arisu can defend themselves. Suddenly, Usagi appears. 5 of the 7 remaining participants gather together and share with each other where the correct door is definitely not located. Usagi deftly leaps to the 2nd floor to inspect the unchecked rooms, leaving Arisu and Karube perplexed. Aguni, the bandaged man, and Karube go to knock the chaser out of the game, while Arisu and Usagi continue searching for the door. The bandaged man distracts the man in the horse mask, but when the latter approaches him, the bandaged man panics, realizing that Aguni is not going to help him. The man in the horse mask then eliminates the bandaged man from the game. When the chaser is about to eliminate Karube, Aguni raises the fire extinguisher and sprays its contents on him. The chaser begins firing in all directions, but misses every time. As he reloads his weapon, Karube seizes the opportunity and attacks him with the fire extinguisher, but without success. The chaser kicks Karube. Aguni quickly comes to his aid, but the chaser proves to be a professional fighter and defeats him in hand-to-hand combat. Then Karube attempts to knock the chaser out of the game with a dagger, but the chaser once again repels him. The chaser retrieves his machete to eliminate Karube and even manages to wound him. But at the last moment, Aguni comes to help again and kicks the chaser. Meanwhile, Arisu searches for a safe apartment, but one after another turn out to be locked. Arisu recalls that there was only one moment when the chaser fired at someone on another floor. He deduces that at that moment the participant must have been near the correct safe room. Arisu also notices an apartment door riddled with bullets. This is precisely where the chaser attacked the newcomer from afar. If the chaser was so interested in that room, then perhaps the safe room is located there. He quickly approaches the room and sees a silver-haired guy heading there as well. Their thoughts coincide. At the moment when Arisu grabs the door handle, he wonders why the chaser is pursuing them if he could simply wait here and guard the room. But with only 3 minutes left until the end of the game, they have no choice but to enter the room. The guys enter the apartment, but inside there turns out to be yet another man in a horse mask. Arisu shoves the silver-haired guy aside to save him. He takes advantage of the moment and stuns the chaser with a stun gun. But the man in the horse mask quickly recovers and starts shooting at them again. The silver-haired guy runs out of the room. Arisu finds himself locked in another room inside the apartment, where buttons on different walls must be pressed simultaneously. He realizes that this is the very room, and to pass the level, both buttons must be activated at the same time. Arisu opens the window and calls everyone to apartment 406 so they can help press the buttons and complete the game. The second man in the horse mask does not intend to wait for the other players and bursts into apartment 406. Arisu engages him in combat. This chaser is not as imposing as the previous one, so Arisu has a chance to fight back. Usagi then bursts into apartment 406. The silver-haired man hands her a stun gun, which she uses to knock out the chaser. At the last second, Arisu and Usagi press the buttons, stopping the timer. A message congratulating them on successfully completing the level appears on their phones. The players remove the mask from one of the chasers, revealing an ordinary woman underneath. A few seconds later, her collar begins flashing, and she is eliminated from the game. Arisu immediately realizes that those who lose, and are thus eliminated from the game, become the chasers. The other man in the horse mask is also eliminated from the game. In the pocket of the bandaged man, Karube finds a working walkie-talkie, from which a mysterious voice emanates. The voice announces that an answer has been received and that they must return to the beach. This information was intended for Aguni. When Karube turns around, he notices that Aguni has already disappeared. At that moment, Shibuki sees Chota praying and asks him if he believes in God. Chota replies that he does not, although his mother is deeply religious, which is why he was often bullied at school. He was saved by Arisu and Karube. Karube, being strong and a skilled fighter, protected Chota, while Arisu, intelligent and from an influential family, provided guidance. Arisu feels guilty that the woman in the horse mask was eliminated from the game. Usagi tells him that since they are participating in the game against their will, he is not to blame. After that, Usagi leaves. The silver-haired man discovers a strange pattern of numerous lines on the woman's jacket, the meaning of which will later become clear. Shibuki's visa expires today. At that moment, Arisu and Karube return from the game, and Chota joyfully greets his friends. In the next scene, Karube tells the other players about the voice from the walkie-talkie, which mentioned the beach. Karubi believes that if they reach the beach, they might also find other people. The team decides to head to the nearest beach, but Shibuki points out that the journey is long and Chota is unlikely to cover such a distance because of his serious leg injury. Moreover, Shibuki's and Chota's visas expire today, so they must first win additional days before setting out on their search. Arisu continues to feel guilty over the woman in the horse mask. In his confusion, he momentarily mistakes Shibuki for her. Arisu confesses to Shibuki that the previous night one person was eliminated from the game because of him. Shibuki replies that when she first entered the game, she felt the same way. Karube returns to the bar where he used to work and finds a hidden wedding ring that he had bought for Seiya, the woman he loves. Karube is convinced that all the people have been evacuated and are at the beach. He plans to present the ring when they arrive there. As night falls, a screen in the square lights up, informing the players of the location of a new game. The foursome sets off for a game at the botanical garden. On the table lie various tools, hammers, axes, and chisels, as well as protective goggles and mobile phones. The players must choose any tool and put on the goggles with collars. They pick up their phones, which order them to wear the goggles. As soon as the participants put them on, the goggles lock and cannot be removed until the game is over. Registration is complete, and our heroes become the only participants in a game with a difficulty level of 7 of hearts, which according to the broker signifies high difficulty and a game of betrayal. The game turns out to be hide and seek. The phone announces that one person will be the wolf and the other 3 will be sheep. Whoever is found by the wolf becomes the next wolf. The winner is the participant who remains the wolf at the end of the game. The game ends in 15 minutes. The first wolf is Chota. He desperately tries to remove his collar. Arisu stops him, warning that attempting to remove the collar by force might cause an explosion. When Chota looks at Arisu, Arisu becomes the wolf. Arisu turns to Karubi, and he immediately transforms into a wolf as well. Shibuki quickly understands the rules and deceitfully gains the status of wolf by drawing the other's attention to her, after which she runs away. Karube chases after Shibuki. During the pursuit, the girl trips, and Karube catches up with her. He tries to make her look at him, but Shibuki refuses, unwilling to pass on the status of wolf. However, during the struggle, she accidentally meets Karube's gaze, and he becomes the wolf. At that moment, Arisu appears. Meeting Karube's gaze, he becomes the next wolf. Arisu tries to calm Karube and Shibuki by suggesting they unite to win the game. However, seeing that he is not being listened to, he turns and runs away. Arisu hides, causing Karube to believe that Arisu has betrayed them. Upon hearing the conflict between his comrades, Chota begins to pray, tears streaming down his face as he begs God for help. Meanwhile, Karube and Shibuki corner Arisu. Shibuki begs Arisu to give her a chance to win. When she lunges at him with a knife, Chota appears and knocks her down. He shouts at Arisu to run. Arisu flees, then tries to remove his protective goggles, but he is unsuccessful. He takes a pair of pliers to cut the collar, but remembers the woman with the collar and changes his mind. Having lost hope, Arisu begins to cry, recalling his father's words that the key difference between him and his brother was that his brother had a goal for which he was willing to do anything, while Arisu had none. Then Arisu recalls the happy times with his best friends, how Chota once said that his dream was to buy a large ranch in Australia and invite Arisu and Karube to drink sake until morning. There were only 3 minutes left in the game. Arisu decided to leave the game voluntarily. He tells his friends over the radio built into his collar that they are everything he has and that he is ready to sacrifice himself for them. He calls his friends to pass on the wolf status, but they have already made the same decision and remain silent. Chota clams up Shibuki's mouth and hides with her in the bushes. When there is only 1 minute left in the game, Karube says that being with them has allowed him to forget all his problems. Chota, laughing, urges Arisu to finish the game and win against all odds. Shibuki, touched by the friendship of the 3, also accepts her fate. There are only 30 seconds left in the game. Shibuki and Chota embrace. Arisu finds Karube to pass on the wolf status to him, but he bids him farewell with a smile. A few seconds later, Karube is eliminated from the game. Chota and Shibuki are eliminated after him. As stated in the rules, all players except the wolf leave the game. Later in the day, Usagi, who had gone out to get some food, finds Arisu lying on the ground. She asks him what is wrong, and he replies that he wants to leave the game. Usagi silently departs. The next day, she sees Arisu again in the same spot, drenched by the rain. Since Usagi now becomes the second main character, we are shown a brief flashback of her. We learn that her father was a mountaineer. He even climbed Everest without an oxygen tank. which is considered an achievement. Usagi asked her father what he would request of God if God existed. He replied that he would like God to create more mountains that no one has yet climbed. When he asked her the same, Usagi said that she would like time to stop, because in this world only her father and the mountains accepted her as she is. Soon, rumors emerged that her father faked his ascent of Everest without an oxygen tank. Usagi became the target of reporters. Her father declared that he had never lied and set out once again to conquer Everest, but this time he did not return. After that, Usagi was in deep depression for several years. Back in the present, Arisu comes to his senses and realizes that Usagi saved him. Usagi gets up to serve the food she prepared and sets it beside him. He asks her why she decided to save him. Usagi replies that his body demonstrated a will to live. In despair, Arisu confesses that because of him, his best friends were eliminated from the game. Usagi tells him that he should eat. After that, she goes out for a morning run. Upon returning, she notices that Arisu has eaten all the food. Usagi asks why Arisu decided to save everyone during the game of tag by informing everyone where the chaser was. The young man answers that he simply did not want anyone to be eliminated from the game. Usagi says that if it weren't for him, she would have been eliminated, which is why she decided to help him. After a brief conversation, Arisu finally comes to his senses. At nightfall, they head to the location of the next game, a long tunnel in which a bus covered in graffiti is parked. Inside, 3 guys are already present: Sane, Takuma, and Yaman. They explain that they met during one of the games and have already completed 4 games together. Even though they were strangers before, Usagi notices that Takuma has a leg injury. At that moment, notifications appear on their phones stating that registration is complete and that the game called Distance is about to begin. The difficulty level is 4 of clubs, which requires teamwork. The objective is to reach the finish line. They are given 2 hours for this task, although the location of the finish line is unknown. Takuma tells his friends to leave him behind because he cannot run due to his injury. Yaman goes to the front of the bus to try to start it, but discovers that the fuel tank is empty. Irritated, Takuma insists that the others continue the game without him, telling Yaman that his wife is waiting for him at home. With pain in his eyes, he watches his departing comrades and sits in the back, resigned to his fate. Watching him, Arisu remembers his 2 friends. Usagi tells Arisu that Takuma did the right thing, otherwise they would have all lost. Arisu and 3 others begin running through the tunnel. After running 5 kilometers, the players notice a table with drinks and a sign that reads Supply Point. Sane, exhausted from thirst, reaches for a bottle of water, but Yaman stops him. At that moment, Arisu also tries to grab some water, but Usagi notices Yaman's look and immediately understands that he wants her and Arisu to drink the water first to test it for poison. Then Usagi takes out her small bottle of water and hands it to Arisu. After Arisu takes a few sips, he notices envious glances from Sein and Yaman. The kind young man offers them some water, and in the end, Usagi is left without any. The 4 continue on. At the 6-kilometer mark, they come across a multitude of parked cars. Vigilant, Usagi says that there is something ahead. Suddenly, a black panther appears among the cars. The players scatter in different directions. Yaman hides under a car. The panther, being too large to slip beneath the vehicle, jumps onto its roof and, upon seeing Arisu and Usagi, begins to hunt them. Usagi finds a flare in one of the cars and uses it to scare off the panther. Usagi, Arisu, and Yaman run away together, while Sen, unfortunately, is left behind. Yaman is so dejected that he no longer wants to run. He says that although he has known Sen and Takuma for only a week, it felt as though they had been old friends. Arisu inspires Yaman to continue, reminding him that he still has a wife. At the 8-kilometer mark, Arisu notices an old non-functioning motorcycle on a truck. Despite the absence of a battery, the motorcycle has a full tank. The team remembers that the bus in which the game began ran on diesel. This gives them a chance to save Takuma, who was left behind with his leg injury. Arisu insists on returning for him alone, so as not to risk the lives of the other players. He is confident he will make it, as there is still 1 hour left until the end of the game. Arisu begins pushing the heavy motorcycle back along the route he has already taken. Along the way, he even notices Sane. Meanwhile, Usagi and Yaman continue forward. They find large iron gates and assume that this is the finish line. Deciding to wait there for Arisu and Takuma, they notice that only 15 minutes remain on the timer. Meanwhile, Takuma, having resigned himself to his fate, is shocked when he sees Arisu with the motorcycle. He wipes away his tears, unable to believe his eyes. Only 5 minutes remain until the end of the game. Usagi and Yaman hear strange sounds. Suddenly, nails from the iron gates begin to fly out one after another, and water starts gushing in. Usagi and Yaman turn around and run back. Overcome with exhaustion, Yaman collapses. He picks up a photograph of himself with his wife, and at the last moment, he is swept away by the torrent and eliminated from the game. Usagi runs with all her might until suddenly, Takuma and Arisu appear on a bus. Arisu reaches out his hand, pulls Usagi into the bus, and slams the door behind her. At that same moment, water engulfs everyone. After a while, Usagi opens her eyes and realizes that all three have survived. They exit the bus and notice graffiti on its side reading, "Goal." It turns out that the bus was the finish line, and the distance indicated on the phone represented the gap between them and the bus. Had they remained in place, the game would have ended immediately. Their phones receive messages congratulating them on successfully completing the game. Takuma leaves, but Arisu calls out to him, asking where he is headed. Takuma replies that he does not know, adding that if he remains in the game, they will meet again. Presumably, Takuma did not want to be a burden to the group because of his injury. Arisu tells Usagi that he plans to go to the beach to find the game organizers and restore the world to its former state. They get on a bicycle and set off. Arisu has been in the game for 16 days and is angry that he has still found no clues about the beach. Usagi and Arisu have only 3 days left until their visas expire. That night, they sleep in one tent together for the first time. From Arisu's eyes, it is clear that he is unaccustomed to being so close to a girl. In the morning, Usagi teaches him how to hunt, and in the evening, they watch groups of people preparing for the games. Arisu notices that some men wear the same bracelets as a goonie in The Bandaged Man. The group gets into a car that runs without electricity and drives away. Arisu and Usagi follow them. Standing on a bridge, Arisu spots the word beach on a building across the river through a pair of binoculars. Suddenly, someone appears from behind and knocks them out. They are taken to a building labeled beach and interrogated about why they were spying on the others. Arisu explains that they were searching for the beach, as he hoped that by reaching it, they could understand where all the people had disappeared. Upon hearing this, a leader known by the nickname Hatter enters and greets them. Hatter opens a wooden door for them, behind which is a collection of playing cards, most of which are crossed out. He explains that there is only one way to escape from the border to the real world, to collect all the playing cards by participating in the games. According to him, one deck equals one person freed. This means the cards must be collected again and again until everyone can return home. Next, he describes the beach, which was created for the purpose of collecting cards. There they have fuel to keep the lights on at night, as well as weapons, water, food, and sake. In short, a place where one can truly enjoy life. At the beach, a strict hierarchy is established. The more cards one brings, the higher one is on the list. The higher you are on the list, the sooner it is your turn to return home. At present, number 1 is none other than Hatter himself. Life on the beach follows 3 rules. The first rule, you must wear a swimsuit at the beach. This prevents the concealment of weapons and enhances safety. The second rule, all 1 cards belong to the beach. The third rule, traitors are eliminated from the game. Hatter, having taken the 7 of hearts from Arisu, was delighted because they did not have that card. As a result, Arisu and Usagi are immediately promoted in rank. The scene shifts to the hotel grounds where a real party is taking place. People here live each day as if it were their last. By evening, all the players are assigned to different games. Arisu and Usagi are sent to separate games, and both promise each other to win at any cost. A brief glimpse shows what people are playing today. Usagi is assigned to a matchstick game. Each player has 9 matches, with which they must find different digits in 20 dark rooms. A goonie participates in a game against a tiger and successfully defeats it. Arisu, together with the player Anne, heads to the basement to participate in a puzzle game. Joining their team are a girl named Hikari and a newcomer who had previously played hide-and-seek with Arisu. It turns out this newcomer is also part of the beach. 3 more participants join them, making a total of 7 people in the game. At that moment, a text message arrives announcing the end of registration. The game is called The Light Bulb, and its difficulty is 4 of diamonds. The objective is to determine which of the 3 switches turns on the light bulb. The rules are as follows. You may pull the switches as many times as you like, while the door to the room with the light bulb remains closed. If the door is open, you may pull only 1 switch 1 time. Once someone enters the room with the light bulb, the door can no longer be closed. 4 pipes continuously continuously pump water into the room, and bare wires hang from the ceiling under high voltage. If water reaches these wires, all participants will be eliminated from the game. The game begins. Immediately after the rules are explained, one of the participants decides to check whether the wires are live. She grabs one of the bare wires with her bare hand and is instantly eliminated from the game, and suggests opening the door and testing each of the 3 levers in turn to find out which one turns on the light bulb, but Arisu refuses and orders the door to be closed. Then he pulled lever A, suggested waiting, and then returned the lever to its original position and asked for the door to be opened. When the door opened, Arisu pulled lever B. The one chance to pull a lever with the door open had been used up. The light bulb did not turn on, so the answer was not B. Arisu suggested touching the light bulb. Hikari touched it and got burned, which proved that lever A was supplying power to the bulb. Had the light bulb been cool, the correct answer would have been C. A message appeared on the participants' phones stating that the game was completed. Arisu returned to the hotel and found Usagi, who had also successfully completed her matchstick game. Hikari then approached them and shared that her mother was in the hospital, adding that she must survive at all costs. Suddenly, Aguni and his men, the enforcers on the beach, burst into the pool. It turned out that the beach residents were divided into 2 factions, the idealists led by Hatter and the military faction under Aguni's command. Hatter and Aguni had been jointly controlling the beach, but their conflict could ignite at any moment. While they were talking, Aguni and his men headed straight for Arisu. Seeing the attractive Usagi, Aguni ordered his men to take her with them. Arisu stood up to stop them. Hikari advised him not to provoke the military, but Arisu refused and began defending Usagi. Aguni threatened to break Arisu's legs. At that moment, Hatter appeared and told Aguni not to touch Arisu. Aguni decided to retreat. Hatter then called all the beach leaders to a meeting and invited Arisu to join. Arisu was surprised to see the silver-haired man present at the meeting. One of the beach leaders announced that the Joker card had not yet been found and might not exist at all. Of the remaining cards, only the 10 of hearts was left. This meant that soon the number 1, Hatter himself, would be able to go home. Hatter ordered Anne to continue investigating the game arenas in Tokyo and to wait for the 10 of hearts to appear. He also mentioned that he would participate in a game tomorrow because he urgently needed to extend his visa. After the meeting, Hatter invited Arisu to join him and explained that he had once been the manager of a men's club in Tokyo called The Beach, which is where the hotel gets its name. He was nicknamed Hatter because of his passion for extravagant hats. It became clear that the leader was a narcissistic egomaniac who considered himself almost godlike. Arisu drank whiskey with Hatter. The next morning, Arisu woke up with a hangover and set out to gather information about this world. He learned that game arenas appeared only in Tokyo and that those who tried to escape the city were eliminated from the game by a laser. He attempted to talk with 2 girls, Momoki and Asahi, but they immediately ran away. Then Arisu heard several gunshots and saw soldiers moving away from a garbage container. Approaching the container, he was shocked to see the bodies of eliminated players. At that moment, the silver-haired man and his companion, Hikari, appeared. They explained the club's 3rd rule. Anyone who refuses to collect cards is labeled a traitor and eliminated from the game. After climbing to the roof, the silver-haired man announces that his name is Chishiya. He asks Arisu what he plans to do with the information he has gathered. Arisu replies that he wants to find out who organized the game. He hopes to return to his own world or at least send Usagi back. Chishiya laughs at his naive idea but then says that he has a plan. He explains that by living under these rules, Arisu is unlikely to return to the real world because his number is 315 and he is as far from first place as the moon. Furthermore, sooner or later, Aguni will stop tolerating Hatter and will attempt to overthrow him, which will lead to chaos. Therefore, Chishiya proposes that Arisu join him and Hikari to steal the cards. Arisu tells Usagi about this. In the evening, all the players joyfully see off Hatter as he sets off for a game, since his visa is expiring. The next day, the newcomer informs Anne that Hatter has been eliminated from the game. His body was found near one of the game arenas and returned to the beach. One of the leaders, wearing glasses, declares that according to the rules, as the 2nd in rank, he should assume command. However, Suguru, one of Aguni's subordinates, objects. He insists that power should be transferred to Aguni and suggests holding a vote to appoint Aguni as the leader. When no one raises their hand, Suguru signals a tattooed man to use force to intimidate the leaders. In the end, all the leaders are forced to raise their hands, agreeing to designate Aguni as the new king of the beach. Suguru then demands the immediate opening of a black envelope. It turns out that all the cards won in the games were stored in Hatter's safe. The password to the safe was written on a sheet of paper sealed in a black envelope that could only be opened upon a change in leadership. A Goonie, now the new leader, unsealed the envelope, learned the password, and then resealed it in front of the leaders. Chishiya told Arisu about this and proposed that he sneak into the royal suite to steal all the cards from the safe. Usagi warned that if they were caught, they could be eliminated from the game as traitors, but Arisu was convinced that with the change of king, the beach's unity would soon collapse, making it the perfect time to execute the plan. Meanwhile, Suguru gathered everyone in the hall and announced that Hatter had lost yesterday's game and had not returned, and that Aguni was now the new king of the beach. At that moment, Arisu stealthily snuck into the royal suite and found the safe in a closet. Over the radio, he requested the password from Chishiya, who replied with the numbers 8022. However, when Arisu entered the password, the safe did not open and the alarm sounded. Aguni then entered the room with his men, followed by a smirking Chishiya. Usagi was also captured. Chishiya had set up Arisu and Usagi to ingratiate himself with Aguni. After being struck, Arisu lost consciousness. Aguni thanked Chishiya for his assistance, but his gaze involuntarily lingered on a painting of a deer on the wall. Arisu comes to his senses. Bound with his mouth and eyes taped shut, they leave him to wait for his visa to expire. In his final words, Suguru tells Arisu that he is off to throw a party with Usagi. Arisu is in despair, but he can do nothing. Meanwhile, Anne extracts a bullet from Hatter's body and falls into deep thought. Chishiya orders Hikari to stand guard outside Aguni's room. Over the radio, he informs her that when Arisu was captured, he noticed that Aguni, who usually maintained his composure, was constantly staring at a painting of a deer on the wall. Chishiya deduced that the black envelope did not contain a paper with a password, but an image of a deer instead. His assumption proved correct. Behind the painting, he found a safe, successfully opened it, and indeed the password turned out to be the number 8022. Suguru takes Usagi to one of his rooms, but she, defending herself, bites his tongue. At that moment, the television in the room turns on automatically. Chishiya, who was about to flee from the beach, felt something strange. He stopped Hikari, who was about to leave the premises, and threw away his bracelet. The bracelet burned instantly. It turned out that the beach had been completely taken over by the game organizers. The entire area was surrounded by a laser grid, making escape impossible. The host's voice came over the loudspeakers, announcing a new game for all the guests. The difficulty level is 10 of hearts. Taking advantage of the fact that Suguru and his subordinates were distracted, Usagi managed to escape from the room. All the players gathered in the lobby where the body of Momoki, who had been eliminated from the game, lay. The host announced the name of the game, Witch Hunt. The premise of the game was that the witch, that is, the person eliminated like Momoki, was hidden among the players. To win, one had to find the witch and burn her at a bonfire. The witch could be of any gender. 2 hours were allotted for the task. The organizers lit the bonfire, and the game began. Some players suspected Asahi, a close friend of Momoki. Suguru ordered his men to seize Asahi and throw her into the fire. Usagi and Mira, one of the beach leaders, intervened. Usagi asserts that no one has an alibi, so no one can be accused without evidence. All the players took turns explaining what they had been doing in the last hour. Anne was seen holding a napkin stained with blood and was suspected, but she explained that the blood was from examining Hatter's body. She performed an autopsy and discovered that someone had deliberately eliminated Hatter from the game. But the leaders decided to cover up this fact. Anne showed the bullet extracted from Hatter's body, stating that its rifling marks matched a weapon under the beach's control. This meant that Hatter had been eliminated by someone among the beach members. One of the girls suggested that the witch was hiding among the military faction, but at that moment a tattooed man eliminated her from the game. At that moment, Aguni appeared in the hall. He said that first the game must be won and demanded that the witch confess voluntarily. Otherwise, everyone who is not a member of the military would be thrown into the fire. Suguru, in a playful mood, fired at the ceiling. Panic seized the crowd and people began scattering. Usagi, together with Asahi, ran out of the hall in search of Arisu. The newcomer and another person also volunteered to help. Usagi and her group began searching the rooms one by one, trying to find Arisu. In one of the rooms, Usagi found a soldier sitting in a bathtub with his weapon. Trembling with fear, he could not bring himself to eliminate his friends. Usagi learned from him that Arisu is in this building. The newcomer received information from a girl that Arisu is being held on the 4th floor. Amid the chaos, Chishiya and Hikari hid in the observation room. They noticed that Anne was searching for something in the office. Hikari approached Anne to find out what she was looking for. Anne explained that in the real world she was a forensic expert with the Tokyo police and that, using a mixture of super glue, powder, and tape, she could develop fingerprints to determine who eliminated Hatter from the game. Hikari decided to help her. However, their path was blocked by a tattooed man skilled with a katana. Hikari told Anne to continue on, promising to handle him herself. Meanwhile, the military set a fire on the street in an effort to find the witch, filling the building with smoke. Arisu tries to free himself but loses consciousness. We flash back and learn that Hikari is a woman who used to be a man. In his youth, Hikari practiced martial arts, but his father was disappointed because his son always hesitated before delivering the final blow to his opponent. His father kicked him out of the house, calling him too soft. After that, Hikari decided to transition. Next, we are told the story of the tattooed man. In the past, he was a writer who had lost his zest for life. However, after participating in the first game, he felt truly alive for the first time. This transformed both his image and outlook. Although both despise their past, Hikari, unlike the tattooed man, strives to return to the real world, where her sick mother awaits. The battle continues, and in the end, Hikari defeats the tattooed man. Meanwhile, Suguru, peering through the scope of a sniper rifle, notices a bewildered young man and recalls his school days when his classmates mocked him. Suddenly, Chishiya appears on the roof and mocks Suguru, accusing him of taking pleasure in tormenting the weak. Chishiya suggests that the witch is one of the soldiers. He declares that he intends to eliminate from the game all of Aguni's supporters, even Aguni himself. Since Suguru also harbored resentment toward Chishiya, they decided to settle their differences. Suguru aimed his sniper rifle at Chishiya, but Chishiya suddenly tossed a pack of playing cards as a distraction and eliminated Suguru from the game using a lighter pistol. Meanwhile, Arisu, who is unconscious, dreams that he is sitting in a bar with his two best friends, Karub and Shota. They told him that he must survive, no matter what it costs. Suddenly, Arisu woke up, gathered all his strength, and tore the tape from his mouth. He cried out for help. Usagi, who was nearby, heard him and rescued him. After he had caught his breath, the rules of the game, Witch Hunt, were explained to the main character. There were only half an hour left until the end of the game. Since this was a hearts game, and Arisu, already experienced in such games, realized that the organizers intended to force all the beach players to lose, the newcomer suggested that the witch was one of the military, but Arisu disagreed. Aguni, watching as the bodies of eliminated players were thrown into the fire one after another, once again recalled Hatter. From a flashback, we learn that Hatter was his old friend. When Hatter found out that Aguni had become a military officer, he made him swear that he would live a long life, for Aguni remained his only friend. At that moment, Anne lifted the fingerprints from a dagger and was shocked by the result. She ran out of the room to inform everyone, but she was knocked out by the soldiers who were searching for the witch. 15 minutes before the end of the game, Aguni ordered his men to eliminate from the game everyone who did not belong to the military faction. At that moment, Arisu and his friends entered the hall. Arisu proposed that everyone join forces to find the witch. Unexpectedly, after these words, Aguni approached Arisu and began beating him. Usagi suggested that Aguni himself was the witch. She justified this by arguing that if he were not the witch, he would have no reason to attack a player who was definitely not the witch and had been bound up there all this time. Other players also began to suspect Aguni. In response to the accusations, Aguni did not defend himself, but said that he was the witch. The soldiers pointed their weapons at him. Aguni approached one of them, demanding that he shoot. Arisu stopped the soldiers and said that Aguni was not the witch. Then he added that the person Aguni had eliminated was not Momoki, but Hatter. Arisu saw it in Aguni's eyes, for they were the same as his own when he had lost his friends, and could not forgive himself for it. Arisu also noted that the soldiers had enough weapons to have taken control of the entire beach long ago, but Aguni did not do so. Thus, Arisu concluded that Aguni and Hatter were not enemies, but remained close friends. Together, they kept people like Suguru in check so that they would not spiral out of control, and this turned out to be true. In a flashback, it is shown that in the beginning, Hatter and Aguni created a utopia on the beach to save people who had fallen into despair after entering this world. However, Hatter became obsessed with the cards. When he discovered that some people were secretly hoarding cards, he eliminated them all from the game. Then, under Hatter's orders, everyone who refused to surrender their cards was labeled a traitor and eliminated from the game. Aguni began to realize that he could no longer watch what his friend was becoming. That night, after successfully completing another game, Hatter arranged to meet with Aguni. Aguni confessed to a friend that he was having difficulty holding back Suguru and the other military personnel who wanted to overthrow him. Aguni called on Hatter to disband the beach, declaring that the idea of returning to the original world through collecting cards was nothing more than a beautiful lie invented by Hatter himself. Hatter turned away and, with pain, said that sometimes a king must make difficult decisions. He pointed his pistol at Aguni. When Hatter was about to pull the trigger, Aguni had to eliminate his friend first. Returning to the present, Arisu stated that Aguni had eliminated his friend and now planned to eliminate all the beach residents. The game organizers were using his despair, and that was the essence of the Hearts game. Aguni presented himself as the witch because he wanted to follow his friend into the afterlife. Usagi asked who then was the real witch. Arisu suggested that the witch was Momoki, who had eliminated herself from the game. Aguni called Arisu's words nonsense and once again declared that he was the witch. In a flashback, it is shown that after Aguni eliminated Hatter from the game, he discovered that his pistol had no bullets. Hatter had not intended to eliminate his friend. He had only wanted to scare him. The realization shocked Aguni, but it was already too late. Asahi asked Arisu to throw Momoki's body into the fire to complete the game. Then she went to the center of the hall and announced to everyone that she was the game mediator. As soon as she said this, a laser beam descended from the sky, and Asahi was eliminated from the game. At that moment, Anne entered the hall and reported that the fingerprints on the dagger had been reversed, confirming that Momoki had eliminated herself from the game because she no longer wanted to help the organizers. The game masters took advantage of this and turned her act into an entire game. Arisu told Aguni that he understood him like no one else did and asked him to calm down so that all today's sacrifices would not have been in vain. When the time came to an end, the players prepared to throw the witch's body into the fire to conclude the game. But suddenly, bullets began to fly from afar. Suguru, barely able to move, was still in the game. In a fit of madness, he threw a torch into the hall and began shooting indiscriminately. Usagi nimbly jumped onto his back. Arisu rushed to her aid, but Suguru knocked both of them down. When Suguru aimed at Arisu, Aguni appeared and dragged Suguru into the fire with him. There were only 3 minutes left until the end of the game. The players threw the witch's body into the fire. Arisu noticed that Asahi's phone had been recording video the entire time, and he took it with him. Soon everyone received a message announcing the end of the game. Hikari, it turns out, spared the tattooed man and did not eliminate him from the game. The players watched as the beach house was consumed by fire. Chishiya picked up the 10 of hearts from the table. Now he had all the cards except the Joker. The next day, Arisu reviewed the video on Asahi's phone. In it, Asahi explained that she and Momoki had participated in the development of the games. Sometimes they were the chaser or a player, but they were constantly being controlled. If they admitted to the players that they were mediators, they would be eliminated from the game forever. The video recording also showed a computer base where the organizers monitored every move of the players. This base was located beneath a subway station. Arisu and Usagi immediately headed to that subway station to find the organizers. They discovered that the subway doors were open. Cautiously entering, they saw that all the building staff had been eliminated from the game. Suddenly, Chishiya and Hikari appeared. Arisu asked Chishiya how he had found this place. Chishiya replied that he had discovered it thanks to a drawing that had come from the pocket of the man in the horse mask. It was a subway map. Chishiya examined the map for a long time until he realized that it was a schematic of the subway. He stated that the only thing that could be confirmed was that the personnel present here were not the game organizers. There was someone higher up. When Usagi asked who that might be, Chishiya suggested that it was either aliens or the programmer who created this world. At that moment, the lights in the room suddenly turned on, and the words "emergency broadcast" appeared on the screen. A girl named Mira, one of the beach leaders, congratulated the players and announced that all the games with number cards had been completed. Now it was the turn for games with face cards. She declared that the second stage would begin tomorrow at noon. Leaving the subway station, the heroes saw airships adorned with face cards appearing over Tokyo. The next day, exactly at noon, they were perplexed, as there were no signs that the games had begun. Suddenly, cars appeared on the horizon, rapidly approaching. A group of young men and women got out of the cars, declaring that they too had come to participate in the game. However, suddenly projectiles began to fly in from the top of a skyscraper. People scattered in panic. After running for a while, the main characters hid and realized that the shots were not fired from the skyscraper, but from an airship carrying the King of Spades. At the end of the street, a man in a black suit and coat appeared. A sedan stopped near the heroes. It was Anne who had come to help. They quickly jumped into the car, but Chishiya did not manage to get in because an incoming grenade cut off his path to the group. The heroes concluded that the man in the black suit was the final boss of the strength games, and his arena was the entire city. He could only be defeated by eliminating him from the game, but for unarmed players, that seemed an impossible task. While they were discussing the plan, the man in the black coat eliminated several players in another car and then took the wheel himself, beginning a pursuit of Arisu and his team. Anne immediately swapped places with the newcomer and stepped on the gas. The car began to swerve from side to side, skillfully avoiding obstacles, but the pursuer did not lag behind, periodically firing his automatic rifle. However, Anne accidentally crashed into a car that was in the middle of the road, which attracted the attention of other players. The man in the black coat switched his focus to them, giving Arisu and the others a chance to escape. By evening, Arisu noticed that no gunshots had been heard for a long time and suggested that the group look for food. The newcomer and Hikari went in search of another car, while Arisu and Usagi went to a store for supplies. Arisu found the noodles that Chota loved and was momentarily immersed in memories of his friends. To lighten the mood, Usagi decided to act as a polite cashier, prompting Arisu to notice her sweet smile. The girl blushed, and a spark ignited between them. By chance, Usagi stumbled upon a magazine featuring an article about her father, and told Arisu that her father had been accused of faking the conquest of Everest before disappearing. Usagi confessed that after that, she began to despise the old world. Although Arisu hoped to quickly complete all the games and return to his normal life, where his family awaited him, Usagi did not share his feelings. Arisu told her that he understood her because he too had disliked his previous life. However, after ending up here, he realized that he wanted to go back and start over. In contrast, Usagi declared that if given the choice, she would remain in this world. On the way back, they were picked up by the newcomer and Hikari, who had found a car. Early in the morning, Arisu climbed onto the roof. In the sky, he saw numerous hovering face cards. He understood that the entire city was divided into different game zones, and the floating cards symbolized various types of games. What they had experienced yesterday was a physical strength game represented by spades. Arisu realized that their main advantage was their unity in overcoming challenges. Therefore, team games, symbolized by clubs, were their best option. A group of 4 people headed for the club zone. Upon arrival, they saw a sign at the entrance. Participation required a team of 5. Suddenly, Suguru appeared. He had somehow survived for the 3rd time. He already wore the 5th bracelet on his wrist. The group immediately felt repulsion, as Suguru was their enemy. However, they had no choice because the bracelet could not be removed without completing the game. Reluctantly, everyone agreed to include Suguru in the team. The players put on their bracelets, and the 5-person team was finally formed. The door to the game zone opened, and Arisu, along with the other players, entered cautiously. When they reached the open space at the center, another 5 people emerged from behind a shipping container. Their leader, named Kuma, turned out to be the king of clubs and a nudist who valued freedom. The upcoming game is called Osmosis. It is a competitive team game. For 2 hours, the players must score points. The team with the most points after 2 hours wins, and the losing team is eliminated from the game. The initial balance for each team is 10,000 points, and the minimum score per player is 100. There are 3 ways to earn points. The first method is battle. When 2 players from different teams come into contact, the one with more points wins and takes 500 points from the loser. If 2 players from the same team hold hands, their points are added together, which can help defeat a strong opponent. The players will not know each other's scores until the battle. The second method is items. Inside the containers, 6 items are hidden. Touching them yields points, up to 3,000 at most. The third method is the base. At different ends of the arena, each team has a base represented by a pillar. Touching an opponent's pillar awards 10,000 points. If a player touches the pillar of his own base, his points become infinite. In other words, a player who touches his own base and then an opponent's pillar deducts not 500 points but 10,000 points from the opponent. A negative balance results in instant elimination from the game. Additionally, players who participate in a battle or touch an opponent's base become temporarily inactive. To remove this effect, they must return to their own base and touch the pillar. Touching an inactive player causes an electric shock. Before the game begins, Arisu asks Kuma whether they will be able to return to the real world if they complete all the games. The King of Clubs responds with a long monologue, explaining that the world Arisu speaks of is full of vanity and hypocrisy, whereas the border is the opposite. He adds that one could argue which of the 2 worlds is more real. After that, the King of Clubs team departs and the game begins. Arisu assigns points as follows. The newcomer receives the minimum, 100 points, and must guard the base. Hikari and Usagi each receive 300 points because they are agile and fast runners. Arisu and Suguru receive 4,600 and 4,700 points respectively because they run slower. The players are paired, one with a high score and one with a low score. This pairing allows them to combine their points when colliding with members of the opposing team, increasing their chances of winning and enabling them to deduct 500 points from the opponent. Right at the beginning, Arisu and Hikari find an item in a container, earning an additional 2,000 points. However, Kuma finds them and challenges them to a battle. Arisu hesitates, but the king insists. After a brief dialogue, Arisu decides to fight Kuma one-on-one. Strangely, Kuma only has 2,000 points, and he loses. Arisu earns 500 points for his team. It turns out that Kuma had divided his 10,000 points equally among his team members, explaining that as a true leader, he considers everyone equal. Next, Arisu's team catches opponents and wins an additional 500 points. However, Kuma remains calm. Apparently, they had a trump card. After a while, the newcomer, who was guarding the base, notices 4 members of the opposing team approaching. He quickly touches his base, making his points infinite. The opponents rush toward the base, and the newcomer manages to touch only one of them, while the other 3 touch the base, earning their team 30,000 points. Their strategy was to sacrifice one player to boost the overall team score. The King of Clubs laments the loss of his friend, and the teams disperse back to their bases. There is 1 hour remaining on the timer. Now that 3 opponents have more than 10,000 points, Arisu suggests avoiding duels and focusing on searching for items in containers. However, Kuma's team begins finding items sooner. During another search, Arisu manages to locate the penultimate item, but he is discovered by Kuma and a girl from his team. The king declares that by losing a friend, they have proven their willingness to do anything for victory, and now it is time for Arisu to show what he is capable of. Then Kuma takes 500 points from him. There are half an hour left until the end of the game, and Arisu's team is trailing by 12,000 points. Usagi has only 50 points, and any contact will eliminate her from the game. Arisu considers reactivating his bracelet by touching the pillar of his own base, but stops and devises a plan instead. He proposes trying to touch the opponent's pillar, a risky move, but there is no other option. The others hesitate, but unexpectedly, Suguru is the first to support Arisu, perhaps because his strength is nearly depleted, as we had been shown earlier that he wouldn't last long. The newcomer remains guarding the base, while the other players head for the enemy base. Usagi distracts one of the opponents, and a chase ensues, during which she is literally walking on the edge with her 50 points. The opponent was convinced that if he touched her, she would be immediately eliminated, but Usagi manages to evade him. Meanwhile, the remaining trio appears at the King of Clubs' base. Taking advantage of the inactive state of his bracelet, Arisu electrocutes the King of Clubs when the latter touches him. Suguru quickly moves forward and touches the base. Thereafter, he becomes inactive and shocks another opponent. This creates an excellent opportunity for Hikari. However, the third opponent manages to get up and knocks her far away from the base. Arisu's team returns to their base with 15 minutes remaining in the game. Although they have partially recovered points, the team is still trailing by 3,000 points. Usagi declares that she will continue searching for the last item in the containers, even if it does not affect the outcome of the game. Shortly thereafter, she manages to find an item worth 2,500 points, narrowing the score difference to 500 points. Once again, Arisu feels hopeful and decides to attack the opponent's base, regardless of the outcome. Usagi intends to follow him, but Suguru stops her. He looks completely exhausted, as his health has deteriorated. Since the game now seems lost, his dark side re-emerges. Usagi tries to resist but loses consciousness. At that moment, Arisu appears and saves her. He runs toward the opponent's base. Halfway there, he accidentally encounters Kuma standing by the sea. Depressed, Arisu admits that Kuma has proven to be a good leader, unlike himself, and extends his hand for a handshake. The King of Clubs, confident in his victory, reciprocates by extending his hand. However, at the moment of their handshake, the score changed. Arisu's team unexpectedly gained 500 points. It turned out that a few minutes earlier, Arisu had noticed the newcomer disappearing from the base. He found him and learned of his plan. The newcomer still had more than 10,000 points because he had touched an opposing player. He wanted to remove his bracelet and give it to Arisu so they could combine their points and gain a chance at victory. At first, Arisu was against such a radical move, but upon seeing the newcomer's determination, he agreed. The newcomer's bracelet was removed as planned, and upon contact, Arisu received an additional 10,000 points. Arisu's team managed to defeat Kuma's team. The king of clubs, realizing his defeat, showed no disappointment. As the team leaders continued their dialogue, it became clear that Kuma was not a local resident, but an ordinary person who had once been a player. He looked relieved, and the other members of his team shared that sentiment. Laser beams fell from the sky, and the opposing team was eliminated from the game. An airship exploded, signaling to everyone in the area that one of the bosses had been defeated. By evening, Arisu and his team bid farewell to the newcomer by the sea. Suguru, who had been standing nearby, muttered to the newcomer that he was a fool and quietly walked away. The scene shifted to another part of the city. A huge map of the Jack of Hearts illuminated, marking the beginning of the most challenging psychological game in which Chishiya was participating. At the entrance, all the players put on collars that displayed a random suit on the back of their necks. The game was called Solitary Confinement. 20 people participated. Each round lasted an hour, and 5 minutes before its end, the players had to enter their cell and announce a suit that only another participant could tell them. The suits on the collars changed every round. To complicate matters further, the Jack of Hearts himself was among the players. The game continued until the Jack of Hearts was found or until he remained the only participant. Players were not allowed to use mirrors or anything similar. Since the game could drag on indefinitely, the participants' visas were frozen, and food and water were unlimited. Essentially, the game could last forever, so sooner or later, the players would have to start setting each other up. The game began. Since no one could see their own suit, each person needed at least one partner. Even though almost everyone met for the first time, making trust difficult, one gangster chose a weak boy as his partner, whom he called Chicken. A girl dressed like Alice in Wonderland, named Urumui, used her charm to gather everyone into one team, maximizing their chances of avoiding betrayal. Her team kept growing, and even Chishiya joined them. In the first round, no one was eliminated. Then the second round began, and the suits on the collars changed. The participants had to announce each other's suits again. The gangster did not like the behavior of the Chicken because he refused to name his suit. In the end, the Chicken finally declared that his suit was clubs. However, the gangster's collar displayed the suit diamonds. The confident gangster entered the chamber and loudly proclaimed, "Clubs." In the next moment, he was eliminated from the game. The sweet girl was convinced that the Chicken was the Jack of Hearts and called on her team to eliminate him. The girl in the yellow shirt immediately expressed her disagreement, but the others preferred to trust the sweet girl. When the Chicken, now without a partner, sought help, the sweet girl stated that his suit was spades. The expressions on her companions' faces shifted slightly. Yet no one corrected her, since the Chicken's suit was actually hearts. In the end, the Chicken was also eliminated. Next year, the sweet girl resumed her intrigues. She proposed eliminating the girl in yellow, who had defended the Chicken. The scenario repeated itself. The sweet girl deliberately named the wrong suit for the girl in the yellow shirt, and she was eliminated. By that time, the cold woman on the sweet girl's team grew increasingly anxious. She turned to outsiders for confirmation of her suit, but they intentionally misled her, and she too left the game. In the next moment, the bald man and the sweet girl intentionally named incorrect suits for each other, while the other two team members remained silent. As a result, both the bald man and the sweet girl were eliminated. After several rounds among the 5 remaining players, Chishiya was the only one left without a partner. He had only to name the suit of the long-haired man, hoping for reciprocity. However, the man simply walked away, then suddenly turned and said, "Hearts." Chishiya immediately realized that he had lied. He approached an elegant woman who was taking some food and named her suit. Then he asked if his suit was clubs, but the elegant woman left without a word. Now Chishiya found himself in a difficult position. He did not know his own suit. At the start of the countdown, all the players entered separate chambers. Based on the words of the elegant woman and the long-haired man, Chishiya ruled out clubs and hearts. The rest was left to his intuition. When the countdown ended, silence reigned in the corridor. Then a metal door opened. The long-haired man emerged from his chamber and began laughing, convinced he had won. But a couple of minutes later, another door opened. Chishiya stepped out of his chamber and told him that he had always suspected the long-haired man was the Jack of Hearts. Before the latter could defend himself, the man in the blue shirt and the elegant man also emerged from their chambers. The game, which could have lasted an eternity, ended in one night. The man in the blue shirt and the elegant man decided to interrogate the long-haired man to extract information about the game master. But their plan failed. The Jack of Hearts had eliminated himself from the game. Chisha left, and the airship was destroyed. We return to the main group once again. Hikari set off in search of her partner, Chisha, leaving Arisu and Usagi alone together. Usagi, all cheerful, tells Arisu that they need to go hunting. The group hunts for rabbits, and although they fail to catch any, the atmosphere among them lightens. Suddenly, a gunshot rings out, and the heroes discover an entire camp of people. Among them is another living person who tells them about some film in a car. Arisu and Usagi enter the car and find that it is a photo studio. They watch that very film. The footage documents the life of a man in this dystopian world. One day in the city, he found Anne. The girl noticed that the water was teeming with more and more fish, and that plants were growing unnaturally fast, as if people had disappeared from Tokyo not a month ago, but several decades ago. Anne concludes that time here flows differently. At the end of the video, the man reaches people from the camp who say that before entering the border, everyone had seen fireworks. But there is one girl who remembers the day of the transfer better than anyone else because, as a child, she had an operation in which a small hole was drilled in her skull. The girl begins to explain that they weren't really fireworks, and just as she was about to continue her story, a shot was fired. It was the King of Spades. The recording abruptly cut off. A few minutes later, the King of Spades finds Arisu and Usagi. In a panic, they run into the forest. Arisu distracts the King of Spades in order to save Usagi, but in the end, someone eliminates Arisu. When he regains consciousness, he finds a girl with a bow named Heiya standing next to him. She had eliminated him to prevent him from running back and forth and drawing the King of Spades' attention. Moreover, it turned out that she was not working alone. Arisu ventures deeper into the jungle and encounters Aguni, who proposes a partnership to eliminate the King of Spades. Later, Aguni finds an excellent spot in the forest for an ambush, planning to take out the King of Spades at night. When darkness falls, Arisu sits by his tent, trembling with a weapon in his hands. The King of Spades indeed appears. Despite numerous gunshots, the King of Spades manages to rise, probably thanks to a bulletproof vest. Aguni engages in a shootout with the King of Spades, but the difference in equipment proves decisive. Aguni is wounded and loses consciousness. The girl barely manages to save him, while an explosion from a grenade hurls Arisu off a cliff. The girl hides along with Aguni. The King of Spades, convinced they have fled, leaves. When Arisu regains consciousness the next day, he finds himself alone once again. With no other choice, he sets off in search of Usagi. Along the way, he sees other players blowing up an airship and triumphing over the Lady of Diamonds. Eventually, Arisu reaches a distant corner of the city, overgrown with grass. We also see Anne venturing deep into the forest. After several days, she climbs a high mountain and realizes that they are definitely no longer in familiar Tokyo. Hikari, too, is not idle. She participates in the game of the Jack of Spades, reminiscent of a fight club. Despite numerous wounds, the girl emerges victorious. Usagi, meanwhile, was searching for food in a residential building when she met an adolescent boy. She explained that his parents had been eliminated in the games and that his visa would expire soon. Usagi decided to take him with her and participate in the Queen of Spades challenge together. In the arena, she meets Arisu, who came because he knew that Usagi would most likely choose the spades game, as she excels at physical challenges. The two are reunited, and Usagi introduces Arisu to the boy she found. Today's game is called Checkmate. 16 players were to play against a team led by a lady consisting of 4 people. Each team had a so-called king, chosen by the lady herself. In her team, she declared herself the king, and in the players' team, she chose the boy who appeared the weakest. Thus, the queen and the boy became the kings of their respective camps. The rules are as follows. The teams take turns for 16 rounds, each lasting 5 minutes. During a team's turn, its members capture players from the opposing team. If a player is caught, he cannot move until the end of the turn, and in the next round, he starts playing on the lady's side. The team with the most players at the end wins, and members of the losing team are eliminated from the game. The only exception is that the king and the queen cannot switch camps. As soon as everyone donned their gear, the game officially began. The Queen of Spades team was well prepared, and in the first round, captured 5 players from the boys' team. They used not only physical strength, but also psychological pressure, insisting that those who want to survive must voluntarily join their team. Thus, almost all the players from the blue team switched to the Queen of Spades team. After 10 rounds, only Arisu, Usagi, and the boy remained in the blue team. But they could not give up because defeat meant that the boy would be eliminated from the game. Before the final rounds, the queen told her team that they had already won, but she needed an even number of players, so she wanted to capture Arisu. The lady began searching for Arisu, completely ignoring Usagi, indicating that she had no interest in the girl. In the new round, our heroes began to recover, and Usagi immediately captured 3 players. However, these players remained loyal to the Queen of Spades team. Usagi told them that this would only bring a temporary victory and that endless new games awaited them. She reminded them that only by winning all the cards, including the Queen of Spades, could they return to the real world. Some players began to doubt, claiming that the real world was full of lies and betrayal. Usagi admitted that she had thought so too, but despite its flaws, the real world is their true home. Her words convinced the team. The 15th round began. The motivated boys team transferred all the remaining players from the red team to the blue team, except of course for the Queen of Spades. In the end, they achieved victory. After the game, Arisu, hoping to get information from the Queen of Spades about this world, received only silence in response. The Queen merely advised Arisu to complete all the games as quickly as possible to find the answer for himself. Then in front of everyone, she jumped off a building and was eliminated from the game. On their way back, Arisu and Usagi talked about how they wanted to return home together. Suddenly, they stumbled upon a ruined stadium. The water there was still warm, so they decided to take a swim. Each of them enjoyed their own pool. Suddenly, Usagi called out to Arisu from the neighboring pool. He quickly ran over to see what had happened. On the shore, 2 elephants had appeared. The peaceful sight relaxed them, and for the first time, they shared a kiss. However, Arisu soon noticed a skeleton beneath the rubble, and they decided to leave. Meanwhile, in the Supreme Court, Chishia participated in the mathematical game hosted by the King of Diamonds. The King of Diamonds turned out to be a former player from the beach. Game name, beauty, number of players. 5 game rules. Each participant must choose a number between 0 and 100 within 3 minutes. The average of all 5 numbers is then multiplied by 0.8. The winner is the player who selects the number closest to this result. The losers lose 1 point. In the first round, the King of Diamonds won. In the second round, he won again. Then we are given insight into the participants' backgrounds. The man in the dress shirt was a former stock market trader. Einstein, with a nervous tic, was a mathematician. The King of Diamonds had previously been a lawyer. Chishia, as we know, is just as brilliant as Arisu. The only woman in the game was a simple-minded player who guessed at random, but won the 3rd round purely by luck, since everyone else chose low numbers while Chishia chose 100. By the 10th round, Einstein had -9 points. The man in the dress shirt had -9 points. The King of Diamonds had -4 points. The simple-minded woman had -6 points. Chishia had -7 points. The King of Diamonds won the 10th round. Einstein and the man in the dress shirt were eliminated from the game. Now with only 3 players left, the King of Diamonds introduced new rules. First rule, if 2 players choose the same number, they both lose points. Second rule, if a player correctly guesses the final calculated number, the losing players will lose 2 points instead of 1. Chishia successfully guessed the final number, eliminating the simple-minded woman from the game. Then another rule was introduced. If one player chooses 0, the other player can win by choosing 100. Thanks to this, Chishia had a real chance at victory. Otherwise, the King of Diamonds could have continuously chosen 0 and secured his win. We are then shown a flashback of the King of Diamonds. When he was still a lawyer, he was assigned to win a case that would ultimately harm innocent people. His colleague tried to convince him that there was no place for equality or justice in the world, and that everything was controlled by money and the power of the wealthy elite. The King of Diamonds asked Chishia what he would do if he had $1 million. Chishia replied that he would give the money to orphans and sick people. After this, we are shown a flashback of Chishia. It turns out that he had once been a doctor, but hospital treatment was reserved primarily for rich people. It emerges that the King of Diamonds and Chishia worked within the same system, a system with no room for fairness. Chishia openly tells the King of Diamonds that he chose the number 100. Now the King of Diamonds must decide for himself whose life is more valuable. This makes the game completely unfair and forces him to undergo a moral crisis. In a flashback of the King of Diamonds, we see the moment when he wanted to give up during one of the games, but he was saved by Takuma, the very same boy from the game Distance. We are also shown a recollection in which Momoki explains that she chose to eliminate herself from the game so that she would no longer help the organizers. The King of Diamonds tells Chishia that he reminded him of who he truly is. With a smile on his face, the King of Diamonds is eliminated from the game. Chishia chose 100 while the leader chose 0, and thus he wins. In the Queen of Clubs game, Hikari and Anne unexpectedly meet. These two strong participants join forces and, as expected, win the game. One by one, the flags of the games burn and fall, and in the sky, only the airships of the King of Spades and the Lady of Hearts remain. In an abandoned city, Arisu is unexpectedly met by Chishia. He says he has something important to tell him, but suddenly Suguru appears and shoots Chishia. Realizing his imminent end, Suguru offers Chishia a fair duel and hands him a pistol. Chishia accepts the challenge. A three-way duel begins. Suguru versus Chishia and Arisu. Suguru declares that everyone here is an outcast, dreaming of recognition while only thinking of saving their own life. After considering his words, Arisu replies that even if he once was like that, everything has now changed. Then he lowers his rifle and deliberately steps out of cover, stating that if Suguru wants to eliminate him from the game, he should go ahead. These words move Suguru, and he refuses to pull the trigger. At that moment, Usagi suddenly appears. Although Suguru's hatred flares up once again, at the crucial moment, Chishia steps forward and shields Usagi, taking a bullet for her. Arisu has no choice, and he eliminates Suguru from the game. In the end, Chishia says that he once hated people who were willing to sacrifice themselves for others, but after meeting Arisu, he too wanted to become that kind of person. Suguru explains that he became the way he is not by choice, but because of the circumstances in which he was raised. He asserts that if anyone were in his place, they would turn out the same. Suddenly, an airship belonging to the King of Spades appears overhead. Other people rush toward them, including Anne and Hikari. The four reunite, and their main goal becomes the elimination of the King of Spades. Then the King of Spades himself appears on stage. In the ensuing chaos, a random guy in a car runs over the King of Spades, but that does not stop him. He emerges from the burning wreckage, removing his coat and mask. Suddenly, an arrow strikes the King of Spades' hand. Haya and Aguni join the final battle. In a shelter, Aguni counts the remaining ammunition and reminds everyone to conserve it. Hikari pulls out a homemade kerosene bomb that Chishia once gave her. Arisu devises a plan. He notices a pharmacy across the street and decides that if he fills it with aerosol smoke, it will greatly amplify the effect of the kerosene bomb. However, someone must lure the King of Spades there. Aguni volunteers to serve as bait, but Usagi believes that one person's chances of success are too slim. She suggests that all the players work together. The group sets to work. While everyone distracts the king, Arisu fills the room with gas. During the ensuing fight, the team even forces the boss to remove his bulletproof vest. At first, their battle appears to be going well, but the King of Spades' combat skills prove superior. Haya, while protecting Aguni, is eliminated from the game, and soon after, Anne is also eliminated. Aguni goes into a berserk rage and attacks the King of Spades, breaking his jaw. Despite all his efforts, Aguni loses the fight. He nearly gets eliminated, but Hikari saves him. Then Usagi launches an attack on the King of Spades. Meanwhile, Aguni takes a cartridge to shoot the king. The battle in the alley ends with Aguni and the King of Spades firing at each other simultaneously. Aguni misses. Arisu appears, having already prepared everything, but he is met with a discouraging sight. Almost all his comrades have fallen. With no other choice, he must lure the King of Spades into the pharmacy himself. The cunning King of Spades senses the trap and hesitates at the entrance. But at the crucial moment, Aguni, still alive, pushes him into the pharmacy with all his might. Arisu and Aguni manage to jump out of the pharmacy window, then detonate the kerosene bomb with a shot from a pistol. When everything quiets down, Aguni emerges from the rubble and approaches the King of Spades, finally eliminating the strongest villain from the game. The level with the King of Spades is finally completed. Only the final game remains, the Queen of Hearts. The system's voice announces that the final game will begin soon. Arisu and Usagi slowly make their way to the registration field. Suddenly, the Queen of Hearts turns out to be Mira. She announces that the game is called Hammerball. 3 players stand on artificial turf on a rooftop, surrounded by luxurious decor. Mira starts the first round. The final game turns out to be an ordinary game of croquet, somewhat reminiscent of golf. Arisu watches as the Queen of Hearts plays the first round and gradually begins to understand the rules. It turns out to be simpler than he expected. Mira wins the first match. Arisu suspects that Mira is deliberately prolonging the game because Usagi is deteriorating. In the second round, Arisu wins. Mira declares that she is tired and invites everyone to a tea party, explaining that, by etiquette, a tea party is part of the game. even though Arisu had insisted on continuing. During the tea party, Arisu tries to find out whether they will return to the real world when the game ends. Mira tells him that, in the end, he will learn everything for himself, though Arisu assumes that Mira knows nothing about the real world. Mira asserts the opposite and decides to tell them the truth about this game. She says that humanity has advanced and that virtual reality with avatars has become an integral part of people's lives. According to her, Arisu, Usagi, all their friends, and other players are now immersed in virtual reality. The immersion is so profound that they do not even remember how they got here. Mira explains that people have lost interest in life and have begun creating such games for entertainment. She also claims that she herself is the system administrator. But in the very next moment, Mira starts laughing, declaring that everything she just said was her invention. Then she tells a new truth, that it was all the work of aliens who arrived on Earth several decades ago, erased people's memories, and forced them to participate in the games for their experiments. However, Mira then laughs again, asserting that even that is a lie. Mira turns to Arisu and says, "Choose any version." Arisu realizes that the girl in fact does not know the truth. Mira mentions that it is impossible to escape from this world, and she begins to speak of his eliminated friends, the ones Arisu valued most. She confesses that she was the one who created the game for the Seven of Hearts to separate them. Overcome with hatred, Arisu takes a weapon and aims at Mira. He is ready to eliminate her, but Usagi stops him. At the last moment, Arisu maintains his composure, realizing that if he eliminates the Queen of Hearts now, the 3 rounds of Hammerball will never end. Arisu demands the truth, asking whether this is the real world or a virtual one. Finally, Mira sincerely replies that it is all Arisu's imagination. She adds that in reality, the game world was entirely invented by Arisu. Mira claims that she is his doctor, his psychiatrist, and that he is currently undergoing therapy, even though he does not remember it. Usagi tries to bring him to his senses, insisting that she is real. Mira continues, saying that on the day Arisu's friends died in a traffic accident, the shock caused him to lose his memory. At that moment, Arisu wakes up in a psychiatric hospital and recalls the day when he and his friends ended up at an intersection in Tokyo. It turns out that Karube and Chota were indeed hit by a car. In the hospital, Arisu sees Usagi, who, as it turns out, is also a patient at the same facility. Mira produces 2 pills and orders Arisu to swallow them, but Usagi knocks the glass of pills to the floor. At first glance, it might seem that the entire series is the fantasy of the main character from a psychiatric hospital, but even that version turns out to be false. The scene shifts back to a rooftop. Usagi loses consciousness. Arisu takes the girl by the hand and tells her that he does not want to lose her. Seeing this, Mira sheds a tear and heals Usagi. Then she suggests ending the game of croquet. Arisu wins the 3rd round. After congratulating Arisu on his victory, the Queen of Hearts says that he will soon learn the whole truth and immediately leaves the game. In honor of the victory, fireworks begin in the sky. A voice announces that all surviving players are given a choice: to become citizens of the border or to refuse. Arisu chooses to refuse. In an instant, he is transported back to the present, and we see the beginning of the 1st episode. In addition to the trio of friends, there are Usagi, Chisha, Hikari, Aguni, and everyone else. Just as in the 1st episode, Karube picks Arisu up on his shoulders and walks with him straight to the center of the pedestrian crossing, while Chota films them on his phone. Upon seeing the police, the 3 run into the subway. At that moment, something resembling a comet suddenly appears in the sky and sweeps part of the city away. There it is, the real truth. It turns out that a meteorite has fallen on Tokyo. When Arisu regains consciousness in the hospital, his younger brother explains that Arisu's heart stopped for 1 minute during the rescue. That is the minute in which Arisu entered the border. Arisu felt as though he had been in another world for several months, even though only 1 minute had actually passed. In the hospital, Arisu meets Usagi. He immediately feels as though he knows her. He approaches her and invites her for a walk. At first, Usagi thinks the guy is hitting on her, but she indicates that she doesn't mind, and she gladly accepts his invitation. The sun shines on the green grass, and at that moment, a gentle breeze scatters the playing cards on the table, leaving only the last joker.